Hello and welcome to the Waitrose Cookery School. My name's Omar. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a delicious korma. We're going to be serving that with some basmati rice. I've got the wonderful pleasure of being able to show other partners a bit of what we do at the cookery school and to share my sort of passion and food knowledge with you. I think it's actually England's favourite curry. I think it's just creeped ahead of tikka masala. So it's a chicken korma. But we're going to start by making our curry base. And then if we were vegetarian, I'll talk about some alternatives to make that friendly for vegetarians. So first things first, with any great curry base, is we need to start cooking our onions down. The best and easiest way to do this properly is to cut them down nice and neatly. Make sure that they're all uniform in size. And if everything's even, it will cook evenly and we'll have a very tasty curry. So I want to talk a bit about knife skills. These knives that we use are incredibly sharp. It's actually a lot safer to use a sharp knife than it is a blunt knife, as we don't need to use as much force to cut through our ingredients, in this case, the onion. So it's really important the way that we hold the knife. You want to hold the handle all the way up to the heel of the blade. So try not to leave a gap like this, as you're going to have the knife wobble every time you hit the chopping boards because it's very unstable. So a lot of people at home will tend to chop things like this. So if you just creep your hand all the way up to the heel of the blade, which is this bit here, and then we're going to aim to try and use the length of the blade when we slice. And when we slice, we want to push the knife away from us and let it glide along the chopping board. Try not to use brute force and cleave through the ingredient. This isn't a meat cleaver, it's a knife. It's been designed to use this way. So with an onion, so it's a round vegetable. It's obviously going to roll around. We want to make sure that it's secure in place. So I'm going to grab it either side with my left hand, make a tunnel, and then I just want the knife to catch ever so slightly in the onion. So I know that when I apply force, it goes through the onion. And if you notice, I'm cutting through the root. So I'm cutting it in half through the root. So from top to tail, and I'm driving that knife down and forward. When it's in half, then I can peel it. It's a lot easier than trying to peel the whole onion. And I always have a bowl next to me to use for any food waste, bits of onion peel, garlic peel, etc. Just keeps your chopping board nice and clean so you can focus on your knife skills. So a bit like a production line in a factory, you want to get every process done all the way through before you start chopping. It's no good peeling half an onion, dicing that up, and then starting the other half. It's just sort of inefficient and a bit messy. So I'm right-handed. I want to start with the root on my left hand and the tip of the onion, sort of this end on my right. And I want to take and trim that onion up like so, leaving that root end intact. So if you'll notice with the knife, I'm just pushing it away from myself. And the flat of the blade is running along the flat of the chopping board, so I don't have any bits of onion staying stuck together. We want to dice this onion. So when you look at your onion, you'll see there are natural lines running along the onion. And I want to make small slices, stopping just short of the root, so that it all holds together. But I've got sort of ½ centimeter thick slices of onion. So the best way to do that is to make my hand into this claw shape. So a lot of you will hold the onion like this, but your fingertips are exposed to the sharp blade. So if you just turn your hand up onto the fingertips, place them on top of your onion to hold the onion in place and to dictate how fine or thick a slice you do. And then we want to rest that knife on your finger. So sometimes your index finger or middle finger, or sometimes both, like so. And then we want to use that as a guide for the knife. So it's my left hand that's guiding the right hand and guiding the knife. So I get nice, even slices. We also see stopping just short of the root meant that's all stayed together, which means when we go to dice it, it's going to be a lot easier, nice and neat. So I'm bringing the knife to the onion making sure that it's inserted ever so slightly so that when I apply pressure, it cuts through the onion and doesn't slide off either way. I don't risk cutting myself. I've also made sure my thumb is tucked away and my little finger are tucked away. When I get to the end, it's quite hard to keep your fingertips on. You just move them to one side and just slice in like so. So now our onion has been sliced, stopping just short of the root. We can turn the onion 90 degrees so the root's back on the left-hand side. And now we're gonna dice the onion. So starting about where the knife starts to curve, I'm gonna drive that knife forward, and I'm aiming for my hands will basically meet at the end of each slice. And I'm using that same claw to hold that onion in place and guide the knife. So I get nice even dice on that onion. And this is how, whenever you see chefs chopping stuff on TV and they go very quickly, this is how they get very precise and consistent dice or slice on onions and vegetables. So just to speed things up, it's this hand crawling back across the onion that guides the knife. When I get to the end, the onion becomes quite wobbly. Again, it's quite difficult to hold it in place. I can just tip it over and then finish. Try not to lift it up at awkward angles. The point of the knife should never stick into your chopping board. So now we've got our onions diced up. A lot of people ask why or how do I stop myself crying when I'm slicing an onion or chopping an onion up. Generally, the sharper your knife, the less you're going to bruise the layers of the onion, the less spray you'll get. And it's that spray of onion juice that gets into your eyes and will make you cry. So yeah, a really good, decent, sharp knife. So I'm going to be cooking. This is a wok. You could just use any heavy base casserole. I just want a decent, good quality frying pan or casserole, something that's going to hold the heat. I'm going to make my curry in that. The great luxury of using this pan is because it's got quite a wide surface area. The sauce is going to reduce down nice and quickly, which means I can make a curry from start to finish in about half an hour, which is a great recipe to be cooking after work at home. The fat, we're going to use sunflower oil. You could use ghee, which is just a clarified butter from India. Sunflower oil, as you can see, it's a clear liquid. Clear oil just means we can take it to a much higher smoking point, and it means we're going to be able to fry our onion. Now, how much oil we add depends on the surface area of the pan. So if we've got a really wide pan, we're going to need a lot more oil to make sure that everything is evenly coated in oil and doesn't risk burning. But I would say for this recipe, about 3 tablespoons is going to be an ample amount of oil to make sure that everything cooks nice and evenly. I've got this on a high heat to start with, just to get everything ticking away, and then I'll turn it down to a medium heat. So the key to any good curry is the cooking of the onions. So a lot of recipes will say sweat them down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. In reality, if you want to get the most flavor as possible out of your onions and start with a really solid foundation of flavor for this curry, you're going to want to cook these down for about 15 minutes. And I know that sounds like a long time, but it will make all the difference. And it is basically what's authentic when we're trying to achieve the perfect korma. So a really good tip, cook with your senses. You put something into a pan, if it doesn't sizzle, we know that it's not hot enough, nothing's going to cook, we're going to have raw onion. So turn the heat up. It's almost like you're giving the pan momentum. So we want to give it a good blast of heat, everything starts sizzling. Then we know that this onion is cooking and frying, and we want to bring out all the natural sweetness of the onion. Really important that it's got enough oil to protect it from the intense heat of that steel. So if there's not enough oil, everything will just char and burn, and that's not what we want. So we don't want it deep frying, but we want a nice gloss on all our onions. And try to keep them all in the area with the oil. You don't want any bits of onion up around the side of the pan. So now that that's sizzling away gently, I stir to make sure everything's cooking evenly. and to control the heat in the pan. I don't stir continuously like I'm making risotto because everything will just take a lot longer to cook. So it's the way that we control the heat in the pan when we're cooking is by stirring. It's much more efficient than turning the pan up and down all the time. The other way would be to take it off the heat and just agitate the pan and give it a little shake. And again, as I said, cooking with sensors, you're going to hear how fast that's cooking. You'll smell it, you'll hear it, you'll see it. So you'll hear the sizzling, and that will give you a good indication of how fast everything's cooking. If it's really ferociously going, then you probably need to just turn it down or give it a good stir. And what we're looking for is these onions to go lovely, translucent, almost get really sticky and start to brown. So that's why I've started with my onion, and then whilst I'm waiting, I can carry on getting my garlic and my ginger prepared. If you are going to do that, just turn it down low so you don't risk burning everything. Have your wooden spoon on hand. And also we've given it a few twists of salt. What that's going to do is the chemical reaction is going to start to draw moisture out of the onion. That's just going to help everything sweat down a lot more evenly. And it's just going to give us a lot more leeway and help us not burn any of the onion. So that's that bit done. Onto our garlic. We've got 3 cloves of garlic or 2 big cloves of garlic. I love garlic. You could probably put 4 in here and you'd be safe. As I said, like onion, there's a lot of natural sugars in garlic and onions, and that's what we want to bring out of them by cooking them down slowly. They're going to bring a wonderful sweetness and a lovely depth of flavor. So being a chef, you'll notice that I use the knife for most things. I find it very easy for peeling garlic. So you just chop the root off and then use the edge of the knife just to gently ease that off. With the garlic, I'm just going to use this microplane. So this is just a fine grater. And I'm just going to grate that garlic straight into the pan. You always want to do this after about 5 minutes of cooking the onions down, just as the garlic will burn a lot quicker than the onion, as there's a lot more sugar in it. You'll see that if you look at the underside. It's very syrupy, crushed garlic. That's all those natural sugars. And if you've ever sort of had a bulb of garlic in a roast dinner, you'll notice when that's roasted for a long time, just how sweet the garlic is. It's the same thing if you think of like a French onion soup. The longer you cook the onions, the more flavor you get out of them. So that's our garlic's gone in. It's at this point as well that you'll notice if you need any more oil in your pan. So I know some of you might be a bit shocked, but fat is a vehicle for flavor. And essentially when we sweat our onions down in this oil, that oil is taking on all the flavor of the garlic, the onion. So essentially it becomes almost like another ingredient. If you've ever had a really great curry and that oil on the top, it's got all that lovely chili spiced flavor. We really like that, so don't be afraid. So I've got this on a really low heat and it's just gently cooking. I can see that onion softening up nicely. There's a few bits of browning, but we've got it under control. Next, we've got our ginger. Really great tip is if you use the edge of a spoon and just gently scrape the ginger with the edge of the spoon. It's actually the most efficient way to peel ginger without losing large chunks, especially if you get an extra knobbly bit of ginger. It's quite easy to lose most of it if you're trying to use a peeler or a knife. That skin's so delicate. This is a really great way to peel it. Ginger is very fibrous, which is why if I was going to attempt to microplane it, I'd always do it after I've done my garlic, as it will clog up your microplane and you'll need to give it a wash. Make sure once you've cut ginger, you just either wrap it in a bit of cling film or a damp piece of kitchen towel, just to make sure that it doesn't dry out, because if it's dry, it's not going to have any flavor. And it's a shame to sort of have flavorless fresh ginger. So I find it easier with something that's quite tough to grate if you just brace it on your chopping board. rather than trying to hold it in the air, which makes it a lot easier. And these fibrous bits we can do away with. We'll just use the back of a spoon. Scrape that ginger off. And then we're done with our microplane. So that can just go in our pan. Ginger's got a wonderful sort of heat to it. Bring a lovely warmth to this dish. And again, is the sort of key to any great curry. These three ingredients are always going to be in your curry base. As this takes quite a long time to cook down, really great tip is to do this in a large batch, and then you can freeze it down in sort of little freezer bags or Tupperwares, and then you've got it ready, you defrost it, and then you can start your curry from that point. It's just a good time-saving tip if you really enjoy making curries. So again, I'm using a wooden spoon because I can really scrape the bottom of the pan. Sometimes people are afraid to do that, but whatever you leave at the bottom of the pan, if it's already catching, the longer you leave it, the more likely it is to burn. But it's all flavor, so it's just that balance of getting things browning, being confident, letting them cook, but making sure they don't burn. We've also got coriander, which we're going to finish the dish with, but I really like using the stalks in the base of my curry and then leaving these top leaves for garnishing later. So the stalks in coriander have loads of flavor in them, actually have more flavor than the leaves. So korma is quite a mild curry, but traditionally it wasn't so mild, and it's just traditionally meat stewed in yogurt or double cream. But the korma we're making today is very much the anglicized version. So it's very creamy, not too spicy, but really tasty. So that base is smelling delicious. You know, like I say, cook with your eyes. If you look at something and it looks tasty already, that's a good sign that we've got lots of good flavor going on in there. It's all looking quite sticky. And then I can introduce the other ingredients. So the spices we're using today, we've got chili powder, a mild chili powder. Obviously it's a korma, we don't want it to be too hot. We've got white pepper, that's going to bring a wonderful heat to this dish as well. And then we've got turmeric and ground cinnamon. This is actually a bit more spicy than I was expecting when I've made it before. So if you find that you're not a big fan of heat, you can just half the amount of chili powder and white pepper that goes in. So my base is almost there. As these spices are ground, should I say, we're not going to need to cook them out for too long. It's another reason why this amount of oil that I've got in the pan is perfect, as these spices are going to suck up all that oil and the base will go quite dry. We've also got some passata, which is just blitzed up and sieved tomatoes. And then we've got some fresh chicken stock. So this is just the chicken stock you can pick up off the shelves. We've got two types. We've got an ambient one and a fresh one. I've chosen the one from the refrigerator. Having either or is fine. This onion mix is ready now. I can see it's lovely. Starting to brown. Nice and sticky. Soft, translucent. Heaps of flavor in there. Spices can go in. Really important that you don't walk away at this point. You want to stir those in. Obviously, chilies came from South America, so before they were introduced by Christopher Columbus when he brought them back, and lots of Spanish traders and Portuguese traders, all of the spice in Asian food, Indian food, it all came from pepper. So the white pepper is actually more traditional than the chili. It always sort of blows my mind that cuisines like Thai, Indian food, they didn't have chilies in them until about 400 years ago. So this is smelling delicious. If you're worried about things catching, just take it off the pan. Like, it's really one for the nose. Back on the heat, in with my passata. And then I can use my chicken stock to rinse out my pot that had the passata. So when you're adding lots of cold ingredients to a pan, it's important that you keep that momentum, you keep the heat going. I don't want it to just die down and stop cooking. So I've turned the heat right back up. big amount of passata that's fridge cold, it's not going to burn. So we want that to all start sizzling again. And this is our curry base. So all of the flavor is in this bit here. Once that's bubbling away, then I'll add my chicken stock. So this is a simple chicken stock. I said earlier, if we were making this vegetarian, we would just use a vegetable stock. You could even use water if you wanted. One thing I would say about stock is avoid using a stock cube, as it has a lot of salt in it, and it's really going to upset the seasoning of this dish. It's also got quite a lot of flavor in it. So you're better off using something like water, and then the chicken itself, when we cook it and braise it in this stew, is going to give it enough chicken flavor. And once that starts bubbling, I'm going to turn it down to a medium heat and just let it simmer away for about 10 minutes. Later on, I'm going to be adding some double cream, some yogurt, and then I've got some almonds and obviously some chicken thigh. So I can see that this is sort of starting to come up to the boil. And whilst that's sort of ticking away and cooking, I'm going to show you how to cook the perfect rice. Right, so my korma base is reducing down, so I'm looking for that to thicken, probably reduce by about half. I've got that on a medium-low heat, it's just bubbling away, and every now and again you want to give it a stir just to make sure the bottom isn't catching. So that's doing its thing. So I'm going to be serving this with a really delicious steamed basmati rice. I'm using the absorption method of cooking. So the idea is that we get the perfect ratio of water to rice, and we're going to bring it to the boil, and then we're going to turn it down to a real gentle simmer, pop a lid on, and then set a timer for 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, all of that water should have been absorbed. The grains should be lovely and fluffy, but individual. It's really important that the grains don't overcook and break, and that they don't become really sticky. So the way to avoid rice becoming sticky is, as it's stored and transported, lots of the grains of rice will start to break up, and then they make this really starchy powder that when you don't wash your rice before cooking will become very gelatinous. Your rice will be really claggy. So what I've done is I've just popped my rice. Today I've got 175 grams of basmati. Pop that in a sieve, and just under a cold running tap, I've just run the tap over it until the water that comes out from underneath is running clear. Try to avoid agitating the rice, because then you obviously just make more and more of that starchy dust. Once that water's running clear, pop it into a pan, and then we add roughly double the amount of water to rice. So if we've got 175 grams of rice, you'll add about 350 grams of water. Sometimes you can add less, and you just leave it on the hob for longer once it's cooked, and it will just steam out and cook. The method that my grandmother always showed me was about a fingertip's worth of water above the rice. Just going to turn the heat up to the highest. Season. If we cook with salt in the water, it's going to absorb all of that seasoning. It's much easier to season that way rather than trying to add salt after it's been cooked and risk breaking up the rice. Whilst we're waiting for that to boil, we can see that this sauce has thickened up nicely. It's important that we reduce this enough, as we're going to be adding double cream and yogurt later, and that's going to basically give us the consistency of sauce that we want. It's in this reducing that we're like intensifying all the flavors. If we don't reduce it enough, it might seem a little bit lackluster and lack a bit of flavor and depth and body. So I would say when you can start seeing those onions coming to the top and that liquid's come down, that's a good sign that we've reduced this for long enough. Then we can go in with our ground almonds. So we've got 2 tablespoons of ground almonds there. If you didn't have ground almonds, you could blitz up some cashew nuts. They would work equally as well. And then we've got some chopped chicken thigh. So the reason I'm using chicken thigh is it's a dark meat. It's a muscle that works a lot more on the chickens, because obviously it's chicken's legs. It's just got a lot more flavor. It's not going to dry out in the cooking, unlike chicken breast, which is a lot harder to cook well. And we're always thinking about flavor when we're making a curry like this. Traditionally, this would be done with meat on the bone. So in keeping with that, we've sort of met halfway, and are using these skinned and boned out chicken thighs. That's just going to go in. Like I said before, when we add cold ingredients, we want to turn the heat up, get it bubbling, and then turn it down to a simmer. And we're going to simmer these chicken thighs for about 10 to 15 minutes, just until they cook through. So at home, you can do this the way I've done it and cook both things at the same time. If you'll notice, I get everything weighed out before I start cooking, just to make my life a lot easier when I come to the actual cooking part. So my rice has come to the boil. I'm going to pop the lid on. And then just to make sure it's boiling all the way across, keep my fingertips on top of that lid. And when it's nice and hot, I'm going to turn that heat all the way down to the lowest flame possible. And if you have a little peek, it should be gently simmering. And then set yourself a timer for 10 minutes. And when the 10-minute timer's up, just turn the heat off and then just let it sit for another 10 minutes. And it's in that 10-minute time that it's just going to carry on steaming and cook out completely, and all that water will absorb, and you should have lovely, delicious, fluffy white basmati rice. I leave my curry on again for the same amount of time. So these should both be ready at the same time, which is going to be handy for plating up. Wonderful. So my curry's reduced down nicely. My chicken's cooked all the way through. We just want to check that there's no pink in the center of that thigh. The sauce is nice and thick. And then also my rice is ready. So if we take that lid off, we'll see that the grains are sort of sticking up. If you check the bottom of the pan, there's no water in the bottom, and it's all cooked and lovely and fluffy. So you can always just fluff that up and then pop that lid back on, and that'll keep warm for about 10 or 20 minutes. So we're ready to serve this up. So I'll just pop that off to one side and then get this back on the heat. So now we're going to add our cream and yogurt. So if you didn't want to use dairy, you could use some coconut milk and some coconut yogurt. It's quite traditional to have that flavor of coconut in this. However, this double cream is going to bring a lovely richness to this korma sauce, which I really enjoy. And then the yogurt is going to bring a lovely acidity. It's going to sort of mellow it out. So you're just balancing richness and creaminess with a nice acidity and tang, which I think really goes well with this korma. So yeah, like I said, our sauce is nice and thick. If you found in that 10 minutes of stewing down your chicken that the sauce was getting a bit over reduced, just have a little bit of water on hand and just add sort of, I don't know, a little glug of water, maybe sort of like half a ladle's worth, just so that you've got enough liquid in there to cook that chicken, and that will reduce down in that 10 minutes. So we can go in with our double cream. We want to always go in with the double cream first, get that nice and hot, and then we'll add our yogurt off the heat, because we don't want our yogurt to split out and curdle, even though that's actually the traditional way. So it would actually be cooked from the beginning with the yogurt, and that yogurt would split out and it'd be very oily, very tasty. But as I said, we're making this sort of classic British version of the korma. So this is starting to look a lot more like what I would think of as a chicken korma. If you sort of weren't a huge fan of cream, just add less. Just add a couple tablespoons rather than 4. And similarly with the yogurt. So things like this always to your taste. It's the same with the spicing. If you're not a fan of spicy food, just go with less pepper and less chili powder. So our korma's looking good. It's really important that we taste. So this is going to just teach us about seasoning. So salt should bring all of the flavors to the forefront. So it's almost like a flavor enhancer rather than a flavor in itself. So at home, I add salt by the pinch. I just have a little pot. I find it a lot easier to gauge. If you have sort of a grinder like this, it's worth just checking how much salt comes out with each twist. just so you have a good idea of how much salt you're adding. You can always add a bit more, can't take it out once it's in there. So stir that through, and then nice clean spoon. Give it another taste. And each time we add, we should start to be able to taste even more. Have more depth of flavor, it'll be more rounded. Essentially, it will just taste better. When it tastes really good, you've hit the sweet spot. If you add too much, you can always balance with a little bit more yogurt or a bit of acidity from, say, some lemon juice. But, you know, we shouldn't be tasting salt. We should be tasting this wonderful korma. That for me is perfect. Ready to plate now. I like quite a bit of spice in my dishes, so you can feel free to add some fresh chopped chili, just depending on your taste. So we've got lovely basmati rice. You can see it's sort of all those grains kept their shape. It's not just a load of mush. So it's a real skill and takes quite a lot of time to perfect. Sometimes if I'm feeling lazy though, you can always grab one of those microwave packets and then just warm up your curry if you've got any leftovers, just for a nice, quick, simple dinner. And then we've got our lovely chicken korma. This is making me hungry already. So this will taste better the next day. All those flavors have a chance to sort of marry. So leftovers, if there are any, are always a luxury. And it's definitely one that you can scale up, sort of double this recipe, make more, and then freeze it down. I love a bit of mango chutney. The sweetness is going to complement that lovely creamy korma really well. This one's got some brilliant nigella seeds in it for a nice bit of spice. And then, as I said before, I like a bit of chili. So a nice bit of fresh red chili. Visually looks nice. If you've enjoyed cooking with me today, check out our virtual online classes. If you go on to experiences.johnlewis.com, we offer lots of classes on Zoom. We've got baking, a biryani, pasta classes. Obviously, we'd love to see you in the schools themselves as well. So please come and cook with us. Yeah, thank you from me, and I hope to see you again soon.